is enough when it comes to assessments? The example that I try to use here is that myself and Monica and Robin all have the flu. And we go to the doctor because all three of us have characteristics that are very similar. Would we expect the course of treatment to be the same for the three of us? Why?
Because there could be some underlying factors for some of you.
There could be underlying factors. How long we've had it, the severity in which we have it, any kind of pre-existing conditions. My point is, when you talk about how much is enough, I cannot emphasize enough this idea about case management is individualized. Just like in the medical world, we don't want the same treatment that the last guy had just because we both had the flu. It has to be individualized to me. In this study, what you see, and the RAND is an independent company that does nothing but research. They're not tied to any kind of justice agency or anything. That they just plain do research. And this was, again, just another example of low-risk offenders in appropriate programs and high-risk offenders in appropriate programs versus inappropriate programs. And you see the difference. You may say, well, wait a second. These high-risk offenders still had a 33 on their recidivism probability versus a 47. That's not very much. Until you think about reducing your institutions by 15%. And you go, wow, that could be a lot. We know that high-risk juveniles have a higher probability of reoffending. We want to make it as low as possible by doing the appropriate programs. Again, that celebrating wins. We got a big win there, even though some people may look at this originally and say, well, that's only a 15% difference. Another thought that I want to plant in your brain is this idea of stages of change. How many of you have ever heard of stages of change? Okay. The idea of stages of change is that every juvenile in front of you is in one of these stages. The stages are referred to as pre-contemplative. I don't have a problem, you do. Contemplative. Maybe I should be making some changes. Preparation. What can I do about my problem? Action. I'm working on it. Maintenance. It doesn't bother me much anymore. And termination. I used to have a problem. It's important that you recognize what stage of change your youth is in. Because if your youth is in a pre-contemplative stage of change, saying, I don't have a problem, and you stick them in a program, and they don't think they have a problem, what's the outcome going to look like? It's of no value to me. I didn't have a problem to begin with. So when we think about that intrinsic motivation, about getting them motivated to change, we have to be cognizant of what stage of change they are in. And I don't know if this is one of your training sessions or not, but it is part of the MI. If you go to the MI training, they'll talk much more in depth about the stages of change and how to move people through these stages.
You'll see a lot of this on drug evaluation, where they're at.
Yes.
They're ready for change.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, this was created in that environment. That's where it originally came from. Miller and Rodnick are the ones that wrote this in terms of motivational interviewing, and it has seeped over into the justice world because it makes sense. It just plain makes sense that if we know what stage of change they're in, we either have to motivate them to get ready for that change, or our success won't be very good. I put him up again. take every opportunity I could. I spent a lot of time talking about formal assessments so far, and now I just want to take a couple minutes talking about informal assessments. The fact of the matter is, I'm guessing all of you, without even knowing it, do an informal assessment every single time you meet with youth. That you're assessing what their thought process is. You're assessing whether or not that they're engaged. You're assessing whether or not that you're making progress. And again, that is a critical point and a critical skill to have, is that it's important that we continue to do both formal and informal assessments to make sure we're measuring, just like the doctor does, that follow-up appointment. Are you getting better? That's what you want yourself and your staff to do, to always measure, are they getting better? Is this working? Are we moving in the right direction? Whoops. I'm giving this example again about, in the same way in the medical arena that ICU is not acute care is not general care is not an office visit. This is that idea about you can't put square pegs in round holes. Your treatment approach, your programmatic approach, your offender approach, your client approach, no matter what you want to call it, needs to be based on the individual and not a cookie-cutter approach. So this is a laundry list of what to remember about assessment instruments. They have to be effective and reliable. The ideal is when they're on your population specifically. Not always real, ideal. They should be administered timely. They are for purposes of triaging. Think about that. We want to use instruments to help us triage. Who needs help immediately? Who's in really serious trouble? Who can we wait on a little bit? We should use them and think about them as a triage. They should help us target what we're going to do with that youth. They should focus on the risk, needs, and responsivity that we talked about. They should be formally trained. Staff need to be formally trained. They should focus on those static and dynamic factors. They should profile the criminogenic needs. In other words, at the end of your assessment instrument, do you have a pretty good idea of what those precipitating causes are? What's causing the problem? The companions, the family, whatever the case may be. What's bringing that kid there? Validated on your population and accompanied by procedures. It's amazing how we oftentimes get the creeps. We have turnover, things to that nature, and this staff teaches this staff. Before we know it, the instrument doesn't look anything like it used to. So you want to have kind of formal procedures in relationship to that. Best practice and risk assessments are best predictors of criminal behavior are known. Those are those top 8. Certain factors need to be measured and have an understanding of them. They include both static and dynamic. I've said that quite a few times. Hopefully you're sick of me hearing it, but you know it now. Best methods is an actuarial approach. The actuarial approach means that you're using an instrument that's been actually validated and studied, and that they have multiple measures of risk.